because of the informality of this market and the dangers of this market all these years, everybody had to be self-taught. But in the coming years, young people entering the cannabis market will have the opportunity to get a formal education in the subject. Durham College has launched a medical cannabis for business fundamentals course. And it will provide students with an official designation in cannabis, a cannabis industry specialization certificate. You heard it here first. Kudos to Durham College. All right, Cam Battley, you've been waiting a long time. Come on out here. How are you doing? It's good to meet you.
How are you?
All right, I'm good.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Please.
Well, Canada, now you've done it. You've legalized weed. And the other countries have been talking, and some aren't going to want to hang out with us anymore. And some are going to want to hang out in our basement. And they've promised to bring pizza, which is great. So the organizers of this event, I mean, it's like they had a crystal ball. They somehow knew that we would get royal assent today, legalizing cannabis for adult consumers. It's enormous. It's a very, very big deal. It's really exciting. And I'm not just delighted to be part of this sector, I'm really actually kind of surprised. I'll tell you why. I'm not the first person that you would think of to become a cannabis executive. My journey has been very different from my friend John's. I don't come from the cannabis culture. I'm a suit. I spent my whole career in the global biopharmaceutical industry. And to make me even more unlikely, I've been a scout leader for 10 years. Yeah, scouts, left-hand handshake. And a soccer coach for 10 years. I coached my sons and my daughters' soccer teams. I've coached hundreds and hundreds of kids over the years. And when I first got into this industry, I wasn't eager to talk about it. That was back in 2014. And my God, the world has changed so much in 4 years. Because today, I'm not kidding, it's the parents of my scouts and my soccer players who are coming up to me and asking me what the latest is, what's going to happen next. And so they call me the squarest guy in the cannabis business, which is not inappropriate. And my company is called Aurora Cannabis. I'm the chief corporate officer. And in 2016, when I joined that company, it was just a little company based out of Edmonton. And today, it's a really big company based out of Edmonton. Multi-billion-dollar company operating around the world. It's astonishing how fast things can move. But how this all started, what got us to where we are today, it's a victory above all things for activists. It's a victory for activists. The people who've been at this for decades, they won. And if anybody needs some applause on this day of royal assent for the legalization of cannabis, it's the activists and the advocates who were proved right all along when most of us were not. But it's a victory for other things as well. It's a victory for rationality. It's a victory for science. It's a victory for justice. And let's touch on that one for a second. In Canada, like in the US, the criminal prohibition of cannabis has always been unevenly applied, to our shame. In Canada, the people consistently impacted by prohibition have been Canadians of color, Indigenous Canadians, and low-income Canadians. And the same pattern has been repeated in the US and in every other country in the world. So it's a victory on so many levels to do what we're doing today. And what I hope is that we won't stop, that we will, in our very Canadian and polite way, take our lessons to the world. And that's starting to happen. Now, to back up, we've had a medical cannabis system here in Canada for about 4 years, and it was about the third try that we made as a country to try and create a proper and effective medical access system. To our credit as a country, we've been trying since 2001 to do it, but we finally kind of got it right. And I love what John said earlier about the face that will go down in history as making this possible more than any other is Stephen Harper. I think that's lovely. It was under his government that we created this system, and it worked. It worked, and it worked in a very Canadian way with lots of regulations. Lots of regulations. Too many regulations, to be sure, and we're only loosening them up now. But that's the Canadian way, and that medical system that we created has been so successful. It's reached more than 300,000 Canadians who now have a prescription from their doctor to manage the symptoms of a health condition through the use of cannabis. People who had tried and had not succeeded in being treated with a whole host of traditional pharmaceuticals in many cases, or who weren't able to tolerate the side effects. That's a good thing. That's a victory for science right there. But because we did it pretty darn well, the whole world is now coming to Canada. We've got government officials from around the world coming to visit with our bureaucrats, and we can be damn proud of our bureaucrats at Health Canada who made this thing work. And they're coming to visit my facility. In my whole life, I've never met so many foreign diplomats as I have in the last couple of years, coming from Europe and every other continent, coming to see how we made this thing work, this medical cannabis system. And now they're watching, and they're watching really closely to see what we're doing with consumer legalization. Because make no mistake, policymakers and populations in countries around the world are well aware that criminal prohibition is not the right way to manage cannabis. They've come around to understanding intellectually that it's wrong, but they haven't quite got the political will yet. They haven't figured out how to get that political courage, how to get their gumption up to take the next steps. But they're watching Canada, and the interesting thing is, from all my travels, I think they trust Canada. They believe in Canada. We're the land of hockey and maple syrup and boring. But you know what? Boring is good. In your politics, boring is good. I love our politics. I started my career off working as a legislative assistant to a minister in the Mulroney government. I was 22 years old in my first bad suit and just full of idealism. And my friends, they spanned parties. There were no parties. My friends were Liberals and NDP. I married a Liberal. In fact, I met her the day I introduced a piece of legislation and she was working for the opposition critic. That's the Canadian way, I think. So we have this boring politics, and thank God for it. We don't have populism of the left or the right that's affecting our neighbor to the south, but it's not just affecting them, it's affecting Europe as well. We've seen that ethic happening in countries that we wouldn't have suspected, from the UK to France to Germany to the Netherlands to Scandinavia. But we've been immune to it so far because we're boring, because we talk things through and we figure it out. And it may have taken decades for us to get cannabis legalization right, but we did it before the others. We're the first developed country in the world to do it. And we haven't gotten it right out of the gate. In my view, there are a lot of things that we need to change in order to make it better. One of them, in the provinces such as Ontario and Quebec, where we have chosen thus far to go with monopoly cannabis retail, in my view, we've made an error, and there is an opportunity to fix it. We can evolve those plans. What I would like to see is opening it up to private participation, of course. But mostly, I would like to see the opportunity for small businesses and entrepreneurs to participate in this brand new industry that we're inventing. If you're going to invent a brand new industry, don't you want the economic benefits to be spread as widely as possible? And something else. One of the things that we have done in the provinces that have chosen to go with government monopoly retail distribution is we've told the people who've committed themselves for a very, very long time to cannabis, the keepers of the knowledge and the passion about cannabis, we've told them, not for you, you're not welcome. And that just strikes me as very unwise and maybe a little bit dumb. We can do better. That's what I would like to see. And it's this kind of an ethic, this very Canadian ethic of talking things out, debating it, but not shouting too much, and eventually coming around to let rationality and science lead. That's the ethic that I hope that we will take to the world. And we're in the position to do exactly that. Because of this unusual situation whereby we had an accidental success story with our medical cannabis system, and that provided a platform on which to build a workable legal regime and an industry on top of that for consumer cannabis. Because of all that, that strange combination of circumstances, in addition to the fact that in the US, cannabis remains federally illegal. While there are 29 states that have legal medical cannabis and 9 states and the District of Columbia that have legal consumer cannabis, on a federal level, cannabis remains illegal. And that's good for Canada too, because on a business basis, it means it keeps large American, well-capitalized competitors out of our business. So everywhere in the world that we go with my company, everybody we talk to around the world, we're not bumping into competitors from the US. But there's another aspect to this again, and that is we Canadians, we get to be the ones that export our public policy and our thoughts and our insights on cannabis to the world. That's a great position to be in. And to me, that calls for a little bit of reflection and a little bit of quietly Canadian patriotic pride. Let's hear it for Canada. Yeah. There are, in my view, a few things that we need to do on a pretty urgent basis. I am confident that we are going to keep working on our rules about cannabis on the federal level, the provincial level, the municipal level. I hope that Chris James, who was just speaking, does open up a hotel, because I'd like to stay there. That freaking guy sounds like a heck of a lot of fun. What I want to see us do is perfect it, and we can work towards perfection. I'd like to see us start with something that I think is urgent, and that is an amnesty for Canadians with criminal records for nonviolent offenses. We can do this, and it costs us nothing. We've got room in our hearts for this, and we know it's the right thing to do. These are people who committed a crime that is not a crime now. It's not a crime today. And it turns out they were right and we were wrong. So let's find it within ourselves to make it a priority to effect that amnesty for Canadians convicted or charged with nonviolent cannabis offenses. And then we can be proud of that again. And we can keep exporting the wisdom and the justice that we're very, very good at as a country. And we can take that around the world. A couple of other things. Taxation. Now, a lot of us in the cannabis sector have been in a bit of a bun fight with the federal government, because they've done something in all of the wisdom of what they're doing and all the sensible attitudes that they've shown with respect to cannabis. They've done something that is simply boneheaded, and that is they are proposing to tax medical cannabis exactly the same as consumer cannabis. That's wrong. It's wrong. And they have the opportunity to fix it. The feds have the opportunity to fix it. Maybe October 17th, 2018 would be a good day to fix that. It is currently, medical cannabis is currently the only prescription medical product for which any tax applies. Currently, it's the HST and GST, depending on your province. And the proposal is to apply an excise tax on top of that. How does that make sense? We have chronically ill people who are using medical cannabis to manage the symptoms of a chronic health condition. Maybe it's pain, maybe it's bowel disease, maybe it's the spasticity from multiple sclerosis or epilepsy. A lot of these people are already in income-constrained situations. They're dealing with all the burdens of a chronic illness, and now we want to layer on top of that the additional cost of paying the government because they're treating your medical cannabis exactly the same as somebody's Friday evening entertainment? It's not right. We can fix it. There are some other things as well, and they will continue to crop up, and they will be at the federal level, the provincial level, and the municipal level. There will be unfairness, there will be bumps in the road, there will be mistakes made, there will be problems with certain users. Some people may not use cannabis responsibly. We're going to have to be ready for that. We're going to have to deal with that as a country. But one thing that I would call for is that we don't end the activism. Don't stop being activists. Those of us in the business are going to be leaning on the activists and the advocates. We're going to be supporting you. We will put in our time. I've been to demonstrations on these things. A suit like me at demonstrations full of a bunch of potheads, and I couldn't have loved any of them any more than I did. It was like a big hug in, and I adored the opportunity. We'll put money behind it. We will help achieve some of the things that are not yet achieved. And we will keep perfecting the Canadian model. And we will keep exporting that model to the world. It's a proud time to be Canadian. Don't let anybody ever tease us about leading on cannabis, because it's not just about cannabis. It's about thinking things through. It's about logic and rationality and decency and justice prevailing. It's about the Canadian way. And I'm done. Thank you very much.
Very well spoken, Ken. I do think that boring is the genius of Canadian politics. You're one of the first people to hear you say that. And the point you make about the amnesty is also important because, of course, now that many people are pouring in and sharing in riches galore, the people who did fight the good fight are not all participating in these benefits.
This is something I have learned. I didn't come in as somebody with all this knowledge, but I've opened my mind and I'm learning as best I can.
Well, good for you. And I hope we can meet shortly thereafter.
I would love it.
We have a little unfinished business.
And it's a photo. Here we go. That's great. Thank you.